In a recent video, I talked about the 5 games that I anticipate seeing at Gen Con 2023. And in addition, I talked about some games that I already know I like that I'm not anticipating anymore because the anticipation has been fulfilled. One of those games is Scharf, which was released in Germany by Amigo at the end of 2022. Debuting during the Spiel convention in October. Scharf is a game by Wolfgang Kramer and Christian Stohr. And it has some similarities to Abluxxen. This is a cut-down box of Abluxxen. This is a card game by Kramer and Michael Kiesling. The deck of cards in both games is nearly identical. Scharf has one more joker because that card is used in Abluxxen as a turn tracker, since it's sometimes confusing exactly whose turn it is. But otherwise, the card decks are the same. So essentially, Scharf is like a superset of Abluxxen. If you get this, you can play Abluxxen. If you get this, you'd have to make up components for Scharf. The box in Scharf is much bigger than it needs to be. I know that's one of the complaints that people have had. Right, it's got this tray. It's a deck of cards, and as you can see, this deck of cards fits in a space like this. There's some cardboard components in Scharf. You can see they've tried to upscale it a little bit with cardboard tokens, which is a good differentiator from the cards, so you don't mix those things together. It might not be exactly what you want. It's not the size that you want. I will cut this down at some point, make it smaller, but so be it. That's just one of the effects of production where you're trying to have a certain price point, you're going to have certain components in. To market this, you're going to have this size box instead of a standard Amigo size box, which is what Abluxxen is fit into now. It's published under the name Linko from Amigo. This was originally from Ravensburger. There's lots of history lessons in this that you probably don't need. But in any case, Scharf. I played it 10 times with all player counts 2 to 4 and want to talk about why it's great, why you might find it frustrating, and why, for once, I don't recommend just playing at the beginner level, which is normally what I enjoy in games. Why doesn't that work here? Here's the setup for a 3-player game of Abluxxen. You have a card market, a deck of 110 cards with numbers from 1 to 13. There's 8 copies of each of those numbered cards and 6 jokers. Each player gets a hand of 10 cards in the beginner game, 9 cards in the advanced, and 8 cards in the super spicy version. You have a turn order marker and some chili cards that show a point value and the number of cards you need to have to claim that chili. The game takes place in 2 phases. You initially ignore these chili cards. Each player takes their hand of cards. You're going to fill the market. There are 7 slots available. You flip over cards. If there are cards of the same number, you stack them up to 3 cards in a pile. One other annoying thing that I have with this game is that the colors are somewhat differentiated, but not entirely. The 1, 2, and 3 are light green. 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You don't see here. There you go. It's a light red, and then the 13 is a spicy dark red, and the Joker is purple. Why not have these all gradated from low to high so that there is a differentiation? I understand the numbers are different, but add something extra so that when you're flipping cards, you don't immediately flip a green and say, oh, nope, it's not one of those. Okay, goes in its own pile. All right. Maybe that's the last complaint. We'll see. You flip the market. The active player is going to look at their hand and they can put out any combination of cards. And that means cards of the same value. If you have a joker, you can play with other cards, it counts as that value, or you can play it on its own, it counts as a 14. So I can lead with anything. Let's just say I put down a 2. The next player, they can put down, again, a combination. The next player goes. Whoever has played the highest combination gets this ladle. They will be the start player for the rest of this turn and for the next turn. To determine the highest player, if everyone has played a single card, it's whatever single card has been played. If someone has played 2 cards and no one else has played 2 cards, they are the highest. So first, second, third. If this player has also played a pair of 9s, first, second, third. More cards beats fewer cards, and higher numbers beats lower numbers. And if you play later and you're tied, then you are lower because you did not beat that person. Blech. Okay, let's say I do this. This player, they are going to look at the market and take one of the piles of cards and put it in their ingredient deck in front of them. This is optional. You don't have to take anything, but at this point in the game, you want to take something. So they could take this 9 and put it in front of them, and they can take their 9 that they bid with and also add that to their ingredient deck and then put it face down. Now they got 2 9s. Or they could just take these 2 13s, which is better than 2 9s. Or they could take these 3 7s because this guy probably wants these 3 7s to go with this 7. So I'll take these 3 7s away from them, put them in my ingredient deck. And do I want this 9? If I don't want it, I just throw it in the discard pile. And there's reasons why you might want to keep or not keep something. This player looks at the 13s, puts it in their ingredient deck, throws the 7 away because this other player is collecting 7s. Maybe I don't want to collect 7s as well. Me, I'm going to look at my hand, see what I have, and I'll take the 4. And I'll get rid of the 2. So refill the market. If you have a joker, it always goes on its own. It's never stacked with additional jokers. The next player bids. Let's say they do this. And I decide, sure, I'm going to go for a pair. This player bids an 11. I sort of set these bids up in advance, of course. All right, I got 4. I'll take the joker. I'll keep the pair of 4s because I know I already have another 4. Now I've got 3 4s and a joker. This guy takes something. Took 13s before. Keep the 11, 2 and 2. Keep those, etc. We keep going until everyone has played out all their cards. Now, I just bid a pair, so I'm going to have 1 fewer card than each of my neighbors. And if we each play 1 card from that point on, they're each going to end up having a card to bid with, and I will have nothing. I just sit out. That's the disadvantage of bidding pairs or triples in this first part of the game, because you'll end up with fewer cards in general because you just have fewer cards to bid with. All right. After everyone has bid all their cards, they take everything from their ingredient deck, and that's their new hand. So, Zauscharf, which will be released under the English name Pick a Pepper, which I hadn't mentioned before, is a deck building game, or more a deck crafting game, because you are going to pick up cards, put them in your ingredient pile, and whatever you bid with, you can add that or throw it away. So you have some customization that you're doing during this first part of the game. Now you go to the second part of the game, which resembles the first in that you were going to have this market of cards here. Additionally, you reveal 2 more chili cards than the number of players. So a 3-player game has 5 chilies. If you have a 6 of a kind, you can claim this card. Or a 2 of a kind, you claim this card. We now, let's say this player is going, they put down, again, I didn't look at what they had. Let's say they put down 4 13s. Actually, 5 13s. They got another 13. And this player, let's say they're just going to do a 10. And I'm going to do something as well, because why not? Okay. This player is the high bid, second, third. When you bid in this second phase of the game, you can still collect cards as you did before. And if you collect cards, you can decide to keep this or not, just as before. But now you have an additional option, which is to convert these chilies into a sauce. So with 5 of a kind, I can claim any sauce from here down, Clearly, I want to take the one that's worth the most points. Not all chilies are worth the same points. Here's a 5 of a kind that's worth 5 points, and here's one that's worth 6. They'll come up in random order, and sometimes it's a race to claim a chili just for that one extra point. If I claim this chili, I put this in front of me. You all see I have one chili, that it is worth 5 points, and these cards go out of the game because I've made them into a sauce. No more chilies. I've got 2 12s. I can claim this for 1 point, or maybe I want these 3s because I've got other 3s in my hand. And I'll put the 3s here and I can keep these 12s or throw them out. Same option as before. And the player with the 10s, let's say he's just getting 5s. Throw out that 10. End of the round, fill up the chilies. See, 9 and 8 points. Fill up the market. And continue until one player has claimed as many chili sauces as necessary to trigger the end of the game. In the beginning game with 3 players, that is 4 sauces. So if this player has 4 sauces, they could trigger the end of the game. But in addition, they have to have no cards left in their deck. So if they're bidding, I'm going to take something just to ensure I can do this. And they bid and bid and bid. If this is their 4th one, and these are their last 2 cards, and now they have 4 sauces and no cards at all, now the end of the game is triggered. These players finish their turn, and that's it. Now, if you have claimed the 4th sauce and you are not out of cards, your turn will just consist of bidding, taking nothing, and throwing that card out of the game. So ideally, you craft your deck so that you have very few numbers available. This is a terrible thing. If this were your hand in the second phase, you can't get any sauces. You can get some stuff down here, sure, but then you have to cycle those back into your hand. On a turn, instead of placing a bid, right, you can just pick up everything in your ingredient deck and add it to your hand. That's your whole turn. You bid nothing. You're going to be last in turn order. And then now you've got whatever you've picked up. Ideally better than this. You can, additionally, if you play out everything in your hand, you have no cards in hand, but you don't have enough chili sauces to trigger the end of the game, you pick up everything in your ingredient deck, and there you go. So you don't have to spend a turn doing nothing and picking up your hand. You just play through everything and then pick up your hand. Once someone triggers the end of the game, let's say this player does have 4 sauces, they have no cards left. This player has a couple sauces, I've got some. You count up the points, 12 points in this case. I would have 7 points, but I lose a point for every card that's left in my hand and in my ingredient deck. So if I have 4 cards left with 7, I actually only have 3 points. And whoever has the highest score wins. There's an overview of the gameplay of Sauerscharf, aka Pick a Pepper, which I played again 10 times with 2, 3, and 4 players. This is on a review copy from Amigo that I will cut up at some point because the box is too big. It got thrashed on the way back from Germany. The components are good, but I don't need this big box. And I don't really like this guy staring at me, so cut him off. You get an overview of the gameplay. It is a deck construction game, crafting game, where you're trying to be as efficient as possible in terms of getting the chili peppers and converting them into sauces and ditching everything so that you can end the game. Because every card you have left is worth negative points. You want to be the one to win, to trigger the end, because often that's the player who wins, but not always. So if you enter the second part of the game, you have a lone 5 in your hand, then you've done something wrong, or other people just started taking 5s away from the market and you didn't end up getting more, and now you've got something that is a wasted turn, essentially, because you either have to bid the 5 at some point and just throw it away, or bid the 5 and get stuff from the market. But if you do that, those go in the ingredient pile, and you either have to wait till you cycle through all your cards, and then it goes in your hand automatically, or spend a turn picking them up. Sometimes it's worth that wasted turn to pick up the cards. If I just got 2 3s and I've got 4 3s in hand, I can make a 6 of a kind. Now I can claim a 6 of a kind, which is worth more points because it's harder to get. You also have the issue as you start figuring out what sauces you want to get, what other people are going to do. If there's only one 6 sauce out there, do I bid my 6 3s? Because what are other people going to do? Do they have higher 6 of a kinds? If they do, they can claim that sauce before I do, and then I might have to take a 5 of a kind, which is worth fewer points, so I've overspent. Or I can cycle through those cards, but that's adding more time. Or I can just throw them away to get them out of my deck, but that's usually a terrible idea because you built that 6 of a kind for a reason in order to convert it into points. So there's all these timing issues and issues of trying to track what other people have, what they're collecting in the first part, what they're cycling out, and what they've played. And it's a lot to keep track of. It's way easier in a 2-player game, of course. Usually can't track everything, but you can track sort of the big things. And that affects what you play and how you bid and how you're trying to go through things. And maybe sometimes you want to take a turn to pick up ingredients because other people have bid high and you can't beat them. And so you're trying to just time it right in order to get the sauces. So there's lots of interaction among the players with the drafting, the buying from the market, and the acquiring of the sauces. This is a drafting game that is highly interactive because you're competing for roughly the same things. Sort of. This is where we get the element that I prefer the advanced game or the super spicy game over the basic one, which is unusual because usually basic level rules are fine for me. Because often when you go to the advanced module of a game or either, it's adding more stuff on, which is adding more rules, which is just adding more things to the flow of the game. And generally, I prefer the most streamlined version of the game because I can picture it better in my head, what the flow of the whole game is from the intro and the escalation as you're moving towards the end game. And I can have that, and everything you add on is just putting more stuff to try to fit into that picture. And I typically don't find that satisfying. What's different with the Zauscharf is that nothing changes with the rules except for one thing. So, 2 things, but first thing is inconsequential. So, beginning, advanced, super spicy, you were going to start with 10 cards in hand, 9 cards in hand, 8 cards in hand. So, the higher the difficulty level, the fewer cards you start with. I'll talk about why that's important. But first, the endgame trigger, basic game, is 5 sauces with 2 players, 4 with 3, and 3 with 4. So, you can think about that. 2 times 5 is 10, 3 times 4, 4 times 3, those are 12. There's 13 numbers in the deck. So if you only have competition for 10 sauces and then 12 and 12, in theory, everyone can not compete for numbers. And I get 2s and you get 1s and it gets 3s. And we all make out by specializing in something and not stepping on one another's toes. And then it's more an issue of what gets flipped up on the market and the timing of when the sauces come out and when people decide to play things. It's still interaction, but it's not as much interaction because you can specialize. But if you go to the advanced or the super spicy, the trigger now for the end of the game is 6 sauces for 2, 5 for 3 players, and 4 for 4 players. And those don't work as evenly. And now there's more competition for what you're trying to claim in the market, which is good. Now you're fighting for things, and now it matters more what you're playing at certain times. Now, tied in with that is that your starting hand size is a bit smaller. Again, 10, 9, and 8. When you have fewer cards, you're going to initially get fewer cards from the market. You can always get at least 1 card. And if you sometimes get 2, you have those starting 10, and maybe you end up with a hand of cards after that first round. Could be 20 at the minimum. Well, no, you can throw stuff away. But 20 at least. And it could be more if you get pairs and 3 of a kind. It could be a little less if you throw stuff away. But often, that's all the cards you need in order to collect 4 sauces, depending on the number of sauces that come up. So you essentially have 2 cycles through the deck, especially once you're familiar with the game or have absorbed this introduction to it, and maybe it all has come together for you and you already know exactly what you're going to do when you play the game. You have 2 cycles through the deck. The first one that's mandated, and then the second one, maybe you can perfectly play 4 of a kind, 3 of a kind, 5 of a kind, boom, you're out. And be done. You could end up with 4 sets of cards and convert those all into sauces and just be done with the second pass through the deck. And in that case, if someone goofs or is outbid at the wrong time or the sauces flip up for what they want, they're done. They can't win. And that can be the frustrating part, because sometimes it's just the timing of how things come up or exactly which cards get flipped into the market, and maybe it just doesn't work out for you because you were collecting 7s and all the 7s ended up being at the bottom of the deck. You just didn't get to them. That happens more in the beginning game, where you have this 2 cycle through the deck and you're done. And maybe you miss out just on the timing concerns. Once you go to the advanced game and the super spicy game, and there's one other difference I hadn't mentioned yet, importantly. Let me do that. So with the advanced game, you're going to take out the chili sauces that can be scored with 2 cards and add in these that take a 7 of a kind. So you're increasing the threshold that you need in order to claim a sauce. And they're worth more points. They are more valuable. They're definitely what you want, but now you need a 7 of a kind. And it's unlikely, usually, that you get a 7 of a kind the first pass through the marketplace in that first phase. When you go to the super spicy game, you take out the 2s and the 3s of a kind, and you add the 8 and 9, which again, much harder to get. And you're starting with fewer cards. And there's more people competing for the same things, because now in a 4-player game, I need 4 sauces, you need 4 sauces, 4 and 4. That's effectively 16 that we're fighting over, sort of. So we're definitely trying to grab numbers away from other people in order to do this. And that often leads to more passes through the deck. And you're still trying to be as efficient as possible, but you know you're going to have to go through it a few times. And so that introduces other complications in terms of the timing of what you bid win and when you pick up the cards and what you're getting from the market, because maybe those are the last 6s. Maybe I know that other people have done them and I think these are the last 6s and I definitely want to get them to go with the 6s I have, and all these sort of considerations. Nothing's really changed with the rules. You've just raised the bar a bit higher by starting with fewer cards, needing to claim more sauces, and needing more cards to claim those sauces. So the rules all flow the same, but now it's like you're running in a race with weights, and it just takes a lot more energy to get through them. It's much better with the advanced and the super spicy game. I do not advise starting with that, because it's a little harder to see how everything fits together and flows. I would still recommend playing the beginning game once. And then, once people have played that, move on. Advanced or super spicy. Whatever you want. That one learning game is helpful, just to see the flow of the game and see how the cards cycle through and see how you want to make decisions for what to keep and what not to keep from your initial bids, because that sets you up long term for whether you're going to succeed or not. But you also have the randomness of the deck. With the advanced super spicy, you're going through more of the deck because you need more cards to claim them, and that's leveling out that randomness a bit. If you get entirely through the deck, then you shuffle the discards and make a new deck, and so things can come back. I've only seen that once or twice. Doesn't usually happen. But there you go. An overview of Zalsharf with a lot of opinion added on top of why I think this game works so well. It's funny because Abluxxen, again, Cromer did both of them, but this is a Kiesling, this is Christian Store. Abluxxen has that same element in a way where you're bidding cards on the table and you could end up picking up other people's cards and adding them to your hand. So it has that as well, where you're sort of cycling things through and getting stuff back. It's got this familiar element to it. It's more streamlined because it's just the cards. That's all that's there. There's a central market where you're picking up things. Sometimes you want to pick up from the central market. Usually it's terrible to pick up from that. It's very streamlined and clear. I had an overview of Abluxxen that I recorded many years ago. You can look at that for more detail if you want. Zalsharf, Pick a Pepper, does similar things in how you have stuff cycling through and flowing. It's got a little bit more, maybe, possibly. They're definitely cousins. Definitely cousins. If you like one, you'll play like this. And if you have this, you could play this. So make of that what you will.